Hey everyone, this is Perez of SolidBox, and today I want to talk to you about some of the new functionality in Power Surfacing 2.0. Now, one of the most important things for a lot of us is the option to constrain to imported references. Now, what I mean by that is you can take a face from your SolidWorks model, import it into your Power Surfacing Edit Power Body, and then constrain your existing vertices, edges, and whatever you need to, constrain those to geometry that you imported. Now we're going to take a look at a few examples that show and highlight this functionality. The first of which is this teapot. Now we were able to import a reference that was a split face and attach our power body to it. Now this was originally a primitive, a cylinder, that I deleted an edge and then I had an open surface primitive. Now what I did was I constrained it to my existing SolidWorks geometry, and that allowed me to create the shape I needed and then still have the functionality that I can then delete a face on my SolidWorks solid part, knit these together, and end up with a solid body. Now you might be wondering what happens if I change the model. Well, if you come in and you adjust the original model, for instance, the revolve size, now you can see that everything instantly fails. Well, if we come in and we edit our power body, it's because our reference face is no longer where it should be. Very quickly and easily we can update the constraint, bring it back up to where it needs to be, and okay that and recreate the feature tree. So what it's doing is it's pulling that reference out, it still goes back, deletes the face, knits these together, we still have a solid body. So this functionality alone can take you guys to the next level when you're creating these complex organic shapes. But I know we don't all make teapots in SolidWorks, so let's look at a few more examples, see where this can help. This Pagani Zonda model is one I did a few years ago using conventional SolidWorks surfacing techniques. Now, in this example, I want to reshape one of the rear fenders. Now, the rear fender was something that was done very early on in the model. I know that if I adjust the original shape, a lot of things are going to fail in the feature tree. We've all been down that path, and when you have 300-400 features in a feature tree, you don't want to have to chase down all the areas where there are problems. Well, now with this new functionality of importing a reference, we can import a reference, create a planar surface, constrain its edge vertexes to the vertices on your imported reference, constrain the edges, and now what we have is a model where we have vertices, edges, faces that we can move around, create the shape we need, then use that to replace the face that we have on our original model. So this functionality alone gives you not only the freedom to manipulate and move, pull these in 3D, but to also not have to go through the painstaking process, going back through the feature tree, trying to recreate and readjust that geometry. Now, I know that not all of us create cars in SolidWorks. Unfortunately, it's a complicated process, but there are lots of other models where this functionality can be good. Let's take a look at this golf driver. If you happen to design golf clubs inside of SolidWorks, you know that you have a revolved shaft, some sort of fixed shaft that you need for the club. You have a face that has very specific geometry on it. Then there's a lot of organic shape material that doesn't necessarily have very strict criteria, but it needs to look good. Now, in this case, let's go ahead and edit this power body and take a look at what was done. Now, in this case, I brought in two imported references. I brought in the outside edge of our club, and then I brought in the front face of the club. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm creating a very specific surface for the face of the club. Now, this has to have very specific criteria, and that's something that we can't do within the sub-D modeling realm, but we can constrain to it. We can have a nice blend between this face and the face that it's attached to, and then control all the rest of the geometry organically however we need. For instance, if we look at this thing from the top, let's say that we needed to adjust the shape. We needed to pull these edges in, pull this edge in, and just slightly change the shape. Quickly and easily we can do that. If you have to do that in the SolidWorks modeling process, you're going to have to adjust dozens of curves in order to get all of these surfaces back into where they need to be. It's a much longer process than just grabbing a few points and pulling them in 3D space. So this functionality of having an imported reference option inside of Power Surfacing can go a long way with your SolidWorks models. Now let's take a look at one of the other new features in Power Surfacing 2.0, and that's the addition of level of detail. Now oftentimes when you're making these complex shape models, you get into a situation where you have to add many different layers of edges, whether you're inserting multiple loops or you're manually adding edges. It can get pretty complicated. Well, with the level of detail, you now can select 2, 3, or 4 as opposed to the default 1 and increase the number of polygons just while editing. So for instance, if we need to make a ridge feature on the back center of this, let's go ahead and grab a few of these faces and go ahead and pull those up. Now what we're doing is we're adding detail at a much more refined level here. And once we OK and we go back to our default level of detail of 1, maybe increase the subdivision, you can see that we still have that dimple detail that we added, even though there's no way for us to achieve this with our current polygon layout. So this is a very handy feature that allows you to get down to a much more precise and accurate level of your subdivision without having to do a subdivide all on your model. Because as we know, once we subdivide our model, we start to modify these edges, vertices, and faces. It gets very complicated very quick. If you have specific examples, questions, if you need more information, please contact us. We'll be happy to help you out.